using every day. This is not something that, most curators that I work with are like, oh yeah, I'm real savvy with JSON. It's a little bit of a more technical thing. It requires a little bit of practice. And the other thing, perhaps even more importantly, is this issue of trying to reconcile those answers. So, we always have the option to just collect one answer from the volunteers, but a lot of times we do three. And so that gives people the confidence that, three people entered the exact same thing, or two out of three, were very close to one another, or so on and so forth. And then we have these custom algorithms, which basically help you, which basically give you that answer, that final answer based on the three entries. Because most people aren't wanting to put something up on Notes from Nature so that they can then go through every single record and check it. Because if you're doing that, it's taking a tremendous amount of your time, and so maybe you're not saving a whole lot. So we like to try and see how we can build up the confidence in the data, and you can focus on, what appear to be sort of the real issues, if you will, or problems with the data that came back. So now I'm going to kind of show you this in an example form. So on the very top line, I have what becomes the output that you get. So basically you get all the data back from us. You get all three of the, if you do three, you'll see the three entries from the three different volunteers. You'll get us one that's a reconciled file, which is like, hey, if you want to just upload this into your database and it's the reconciled answers, you can do that. And then you get like a summary file, which kind of tries to flag some of the data. This is kind of a little bit of a clip from that, is from the sort of error file that helps you kind of see how things went. So in the top row, we have this output, and this is basically what would come to you in your reconciled file. 1, 2, and 3 are these individual transcriptions, right? Because remember, we talked about 3 unique users do it. So this is the username here, pverbeek, beta b, and suim28 are the 3 different users that entered these transcriptions. And so if we go to the first column here, the first column is sort of unique numbers that are given through the system. They're not really important for our purposes right now. The second column are the users. Third column is the first question we asked them. So we basically said, what country was this collected in? All 3 users chose Canada. So you get a unanimous match. The output says Canada. So, so we can feel pretty good about that. Now, in the next question was about province, or, state or province kind of level question. 2 people said Ontario. 1 person didn't enter it for some reason, wasn't sure, or what have you. Our algorithm says 2 out of 3 is good enough for us. We're going to put Ontario into the output. Now we get into sort of a district or county level question, and there was some confusion here. So, somebody put just the name of this district that they found, someone put it with the district, and then someone left it blank again. So now the system says, you know what, we're not so sure that these are the same thing. So we're going to flag this. We're going to say that you should take a closer look at this particular field on this particular record and decide what you think should be in there. So that's kind of in a nutshell how it works. I mean, there are kind of some different decision points based on, for example, long text strings, and some of those we sort of make decisions about what makes sense. Sometimes longer text is considered better because you figure, well, it's not too bad to have extra information. So, we strip out punctuation and those sorts of things so that something like a period or a comma is not gonna, make the answers seem overly different. So, but this is basically the way that our custom algorithm works in order to try and produce something for you that you can find where the issues are, and you can accept, where it seems like everything went well. And then we did actually a little study on this. So we kind of simulated volunteers by a graduate student at University of Florida, basically train people like they would if they came to the herbarium and they were interested in, or they were hired to do digitization. They sort of tried to simulate that. Like, here's a little manual. Here, I'm going to sit with you and teach you how to do this. And then they turn them loose on the data. Then we put the same data set in front of volunteers. And then we don't know if they read all the directions, right? They kind of, we hope they do, and I think a lot do, but you're sort of leaving it a little more open. And so when we compared the the red, which is the Notes from Nature volunteers, to the volunteers on site, first of all, I think the first thing to notice is that they're both really high. The accuracy is above 95% or just below 95% for Notes from Nature. And so they both get, the data quite accurate, I would argue. So this is just comparing like the one entry versus one entry. But then when we actually take the the replicates and we say, hey, let's compare now the replicates of the three answers to the original trained volunteers, then there's no statistical difference between them. So what we're really saying is that three volunteers reconciled is just as good, if not better, than someone being trained like a technician on site. Now, this was just one study. You can check it out. You can read it. I mean, it doesn't necessarily represent every kind of specimen or every kind of task that they might do. But, this was something that for years we weren't quite sure what the answer was or how to quantify it. I mean, we had a good feeling about how things were going, but this was the first time we really sat down and tried to do this in a sort of apples to apples way. And so, I think hopefully this gives people a little more confidence in what in what they're going to get if they embark on a project like this. I'm going to skip the funding discussion for now. Again, I mentioned this issue of us, already having a CERNAC kind of project. So the basic idea is that you come to the site, you click on this Notes from Nature Southeast U.S. Biodiversity page, and then you'll be presented with one or more active expeditions that you can dive into. I think we have 2 right now that are running, and people can then work on those, giving it a Southeastern theme or kind of a little bit of a common kind of theme to it. Yeah, so this was just a screenshot of, this is a screenshot of the actual landing page when there were 3 different expeditions. So you can see there were 3 going at the same time, and then you would just click on one of these little buttons at the bottom, and that would take you to the page to actually try it. So the next part of my talk is going to be a little bit more about the automated stuff, and some of the things we're doing with like AI and stuff. So I just maybe take a pause for a second and see if there's any questions about Notes from Nature specifically. Okay. I think I'll keep going then. So one of the things that we've noticed over the years is that, humans are really good at things like interpreting, for example, where something could be, piecing together different pieces of information on the sheet. Maybe, you're lucky and this person actually knows the geography really well or knows the collector really well. So humans can do a lot of, right, really good kind of problem solving. They can interpret difficult handwriting, and things like that. But we also know that some of these fields are really pretty easy for a computer to capture on its own. So for example, let's say we have a typewritten label, it's a modern label, it's very clear, and it has a date on it. That tends to be the kind of information that's, we can pretty easily capture in an automated way off the label. So what we thought was, what if we built using AI and using some algorithms, what if we tried to pre-filter specimens before they go into Notes from Nature, and so that we can make better use of the humans? So the idea was to accelerate digitization and then actually give humans the things they really are needed for. So we set out on this DigiLeap project, and it basically has 3 components. So we have the label segmentation. So we try and pull the label off of the actual image of a herbarium specimen. We have OCR, and then we have what we call information extraction. And this is basically the algorithm that tries to give meaning to the words that the OCR pulls out. So this is a very complicated diagram, but the basic idea here is that we're trying to use humans at different portions of this process. So, for example, let's say that the OCR, we do some basic QA/QC on the OCR outputs, and then it fails. Well, then we're going to say, hey, let's go and send that to a full human transcription. If it passes, maybe we can check for other things related to the information that was pulled out, or so on and so forth. So the basic idea is that we're kind of trying to use humans along this process so that it's a semi-automated way of trying to improve the digitization. The other thing that we can do is we can utilize humans to help us train the algorithm. So we can, like, for example, ask them to tell us where the labels are on the specimen to make sure that we're capturing them correctly, to make sure that we characterize the labels correctly that are on the sheet, separating barcodes from annotation labels and this sort of thing. So we actually, when we built this first label segmentation algorithm, we actually created Notes from Nature expeditions where we asked people to simply draw a box around the label and tell us if it's handwriting or typewritten. So that enabled us to actually improve the performance of the algorithm to actually pull the labels off. And the basic idea is that if you have the label isolated, you're going to get better results from the OCR and from the label extraction. So this is kind of like little screenshots for how simple this was. We presented volunteers with the thing and we said, draw the rectangle and then simply tell us what you see. Do you see all handwritten, all typewritten, or both, or is this a barcode? And we just wanted to make sure the computer could do that. And so obviously many of you here are familiar with this, but you get all kinds of fun things, right? You get mixed labels, you get these dotted lines, you get typing, you get smeared ink, and so on and so forth. But for the most part, our algorithm does a very good job of pulling out the main label and identifying it as typewritten. I'll get into a little bit more about why typewritten versus handwritten is kind of important to this in a moment, but it's worked quite well at basically isolating those labels, and then it basically clips them out so that the algorithm can look just at the label instead of getting confused by the plants and the accession numbers and any kinds of things that are on the sheet. So this is actually a real result of using basically a tesseract from OCR, which is a type of optical character recognition. I will tell you right now that this is exactly the kind of label that confuses OCR, because these dots, for example, along the bottom, this was probably more of a template type label where people had, the pre-printed and the lines pre-printed, and then they would type the sort of what the thing specifically was. These actually confuse OCR a lot because these dots and these sorts of different texts. So you literally get stuff like this on the right, where there's lots of, kind of gibberish or, false characters being added and real characters being taken away and so on and so forth. So one of the things that we said was, well, this is a typewritten label. So can we improve upon this? What could we do to maybe improve upon this kind of thing? And so I don't actually have, I thought I had the same label on there, but in any case, what we did was we added some pre-processing steps to the image. And so it basically tries to improve how the computer sees what's on the actual label. And this turned out to actually have a very beneficial impact on the output. So we get much cleaner outputs from the OCR if we do these pre-processing steps. And it does some scaling, it does some rotation, and so on and so forth to help the computer see the results. The other thing that we found is that when we use two OCR engines and then put them together, that gave us a better result than one on its own. So right now we use what's called Tesseract, which is like the Google free OCR product, and another free product called Easy OCR. And it was good enough that we decided to keep both in there. So if you use DigiLeap, if you use this algorithm, you'll actually be running both of those engines, and then it gives you kind of its what's called an ensemble. Like it takes them together and it gives you the best possible answer. So it's really, really improved the results. And I think you can see, for example, with this label, that it really captures the text quite well. There are a couple little issues here. For example, like there's a dollar sign. The S was misinterpreted as a dollar sign. So it's certainly not perfect, but it's very good. I think compared to what we were previously seeing. And then just to kind of again mention that human in the loop portion, we basically then presented this OCR outputs to the volunteers and said, simply tell us, did you see, does it seem like it's good? Does it seem like there's tons of problems? Did you see substitutions? Like that's where a letter gets substituted for another letter. Did you see deletions where a letter is not captured at all by the OCR? Or did you see an insertion like something completely new gets put into the output? And so we actually use this to further refine the OCR by just simply getting some high level rather than correcting every single error, just getting some high level impression of how it did was able to get us to improve the OCR. So this is actually an actual example of the information extraction. So then the third piece is this basically trying to put it into Darwin Core. So when we say information extraction, we used to call it parsing. Sometimes people would refer to it, but the basic idea is that, can we give meaning to these words? You and I look at it and we see Colorado, USA. We know that's the state and the country, but does we need the computer to understand that and put it in the correct format. So what this last piece does is it tries to do just that. It takes this output and it basically takes USA, it puts it in country, it takes the scientific name, and so it creates this output where it's kind of put into its appropriate Darwin core fields. And we actually we have a paper coming out that's very close to coming out, but basically that delves into kind of how well it does and where the errors are and those sorts of things. It's certainly not perfect, but I think it's a vast improvement upon what we've kind of been using in the community. But one of the questions that we got, was people said, well, why can't I just use ChatGPT? Because ChatGPT became, obviously this was not widely available when we first got this grant, but it's become more widely available now. So a lot of people just said, well, why should I bother with yours if I can just ask ChatGPT to do it? So we actually decided to delve into that very question. And so we compared ChatGPT to ours, and then we actually decided to again do an ensemble. So you can basically decide to use just our algorithm, ChatGPT, or use them together and then try and, ensemble them again to get your best possible answer. Now, before I look at some of the issues here, I want to point out that ChatGPT costs money. So if you wish to go down this road and you want to use this DigiLeap with ChatGPT, you basically have to create an account and have some money in there because it's going to start charging you past a certain number of requests. Now, the other hard part about this for a lot of us is it's hard to figure out exactly what it's going to cost because basically it depends on the amount of text that you send through it is how it charges you. So just based on our testing and what we did, it comes out to be a few cents a specimen. So not terribly expensive, but at the same time, if you're trying to do lots of specimens, and you're not totally sure and your budget's limited, it still, can be a little problematic to make sure you're able to kind of keep the account running. But nevertheless, this was something that based on community feedback, we added. So you have this option if you want to use it. But basically what we found is that when we kind of scored these labels, we tried to look at like omissions and commissions, like where things were omitted completely. Like, for example, it missed the state, or there were commissions, like the state ended up in the wrong, in the wrong field. And so you can see that actually commissions are quite low with ChatGPT, but omissions are pretty high, like it misses things. And then our DigiLeap, commissions were pretty high and omissions were also, kind of high like ChatGPT. So basically putting them together lowers them both. So it does have some advantages, but like I said, it's not 100% perfect at this point. The other thing that ChatGPT, one of the problems that it has is you run into some issues. Like for example, I'll mention two that happened to us quite a bit. Is occasionally, say every 100th record or something, ChatGPT will basically make up a Darwin core field that doesn't exist. So it's basically hallucinating something. It has some confusion in its, processing. And so it comes up with, I don't even know what, like, type of desk or something, so it's using something that actually isn't Darwin core, but it presents it to you like it is. So it hallucinates on that. The other thing is that it's sometimes if you tell it, um, like we would tell it how to format the outputs, and then it would like reformat them halfway through. So, ChatGPT has its own issues that one just has to be aware of. They're not necessarily insurmountable, but again, it's that whole technical thing. Like, how would you even know it misformatted the output? It would take some time for you to figure out why it wasn't working, and you wouldn't necessarily expect it to do that. But these are things that, unfortunately, are the realities of using, some of these technologies. Um, so I'll run through an actual example that I ran. Admittedly, this is a fairly simple label, but it's, probably not entirely unrepresentative of labels you'd see through the 60s, 70s, 80s kind of time frame. Would be something like this one from the California Academy of Sciences. So we ran the algorithm, obviously very, relatively easy because all it has is a barcode and a stamp, and it has a fragment packet, which I guess could confuse it. But nevertheless, it was able to pull out just the main label and characterize it as typewritten. This was the OCR output. So it captured it. I think this one is pretty good. If anybody notices any errors, feel free to point them out. But I think this one actually captured it pretty well. And then it did a very good job of putting it into the correct fields. It did not, I think this one missed country. Oh, no, sorry, state. No, it did capture the state right here, California. The county's Monterey. It got the correct date of collection. And it actually will it'll capture the verbatim the way that it was written on the label, and then it'll also do the reformatted event date, in the kind of standard format with the year, month, day. Um, but for the most part, this is again, admittedly, a somewhat simple example. But it did a pretty good job, I think, something that would at least be acceptable to most people as far as, if I was wanting to decide if I wanted more people to transcribe this or if I would accept the sort of machine results. I think I would argue that people would be pretty happy with this particular result using DigiLeap. So yeah, I mean, the kind of take home from all of this is, there's a lot of benefits to public participation, and helping you reach your goals. I mean, and this can kind of be twofold. I think there's two kind of broad categories. You could be just interested in doing some outreach and utilizing something like Notes from Nature to get the word out or engage with a community or, reach out to communities that might be interested in your stuff. And then there could be, broader, like I want lots of data transcribed so that I can ask these science questions. So I think it's suitable, for both of those things. Um, Notes from Nature is not the only platform out there, but we feel like we have a lot of the expertise and experience to help you figure out what's best and if it would be a good fit for you to use our platform. Um, there is obviously effort on your part involved in this. I would love to say that, you can just send us specimens and that's the end of it, and we just send you back data that you can use. But these things do always take some effort to kind of put together in the beginning and make sure you're getting quality data in the end. And I want to emphasize that we also have this DigiLeap tool. So if you're interested in trying this out, or you want to see some specific examples with your specimens, we can, do that on the side, or we could have another meeting where we kind of look together at some of the results. So, please reach out if you're interested in DigiLeap as well. And then just to, thank my colleagues who helped me with this. Rob Grownick and Julie Allen are the main project leads. Rob's at University of Florida and Julie's at Virginia Tech now. And our amazing developer, his name is Rafe LaFrance, and he's at University of Florida. And we're on the Zooniverse platform, and we, get a tremendous amount of benefit from that. It's a huge community of citizen science projects. So it's really important to remember that they are sort of the backbone of all this, and they help us and keep the platform running and all of that sort of thing. So I think I'll stop there and kind of see where we are on discussion and questions and things like that.
So I think something in the chat is somebody's asking for your email, which
I'm putting it in right now.
Perfect. Well, if I'm going to go ahead and start with the questions, because I do have some questions myself.
Okay, I think Donna does too. So great.
Oh, I'm going to go for it. Sorry. Go ahead.
Hi, Michael. I just
Hi,
wanted
Donna.
to ask if you had looked at using two transcriptions for verification. Like if I have two really well-trained students and so then it's either it matches or it doesn't. And how does that compare to the three? Or how is that an option to reset the defaults or?
Great question. So yes, you can choose anything from one to I don't know, a million. I've never tried, but yes, we can change it for every expedition how people want. And I encourage people to try for less, because I mean, I think you can all figure out that if we have 1,000 specimens and we get 3 people, that's now 3,000 entries, right? So it's increasing the effort too. But the problem with 2 is that when you get ties, or when you get sorry, not a tie, but like if the 2 people enter something different, it doesn't know what to do. So that's the biggest problem with 2s or any even number, is that you may end up with more records to look at. But on the other hand, if these are 2 trusted people and you think they're doing a good job, then it may be fine. But that's the only thing that can happen with even numbers, is like what to do when there's a discrepancy. And then but I encourage people to try for 1. A lot of people are too nervous, but honestly, we don't get a lot of spam. We don't get a lot of people coming to just enter gibberish. Most people who come to our site actually want to help. They're not getting paid. They're not getting, they're just doing it for fun. So I'm kind of a fan of trying more of the 1 off and seeing if that's good for you. But obviously we gotta, meet people's comfort level and all that. But 2 is absolutely possible.
Are you able to run a specimen through Notes from Nature twice?
Yes.
Okay, so you are. Sorry, that came up, and I just wanted to clarify that. Okay, yeah, because I think there were questions of trying to like go through, like something Avery and I would like to do is go through and get the data that is required for duplicates. Once we realize what the duplicates are, the unicates are, we want to run it through again to get the full label data. Okay.
Yeah, and actually I'm kind of a fan of sometimes breaking things up. I mean, that's a great example that you just gave, but like sometimes like too much can slow people down, or they get a little fatigued. Whereas if you do it in, like, if you break it up, say you like had 15 questions that you just had to have, like maybe we break it up into 2, 7,
Yeah.
and You know, and so, yes, I think thinking creatively like that is really good and can sometimes result in you getting the data faster than trying to capture everything all at once.
So I found the transcription really interesting. Because I like the idea for catch up or backlogs for some of these institutions. Um, do you know if there are many or new resources for like deciphering like handwriting for the older specimens? So okay.
Yeah, thank you. I actually meant to come back to that. So this is one of the challenges is handwriting recognition. There are algorithms out there, and I'm not an expert on all of them, but they're not as good as the typewritten ones. So we still kind of feel like humans are doing better than the machines at handwriting.
Mhm.
That so we kind of think that's still going to take a while, but it's an active area of research. It's an active area of people trying to improve upon those. But so far, we've felt like we want to emphasize the typewritten stuff and see how we can do. As I don't need to tell anyone here on this call, we got a lot of stuff to digitize. So we know we have to chunk this up, and we're just still feeling like we're not sure if these handwriting algorithms are quite as advanced. So we're still kind of focused on typewritten for the automated.
Right.
Obviously, the human, we feel like handwriting is great for humans because they can interpret it, they can read the big loops, right? The older handwriting. Um, and so yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
actually, so I'm curious, what are your training data numbers when you're dealing with this? Like, so let's say you do want to teach an algorithm to read handwriting. Are we talking about 10,000 specimens, 20,000?
So I don't know if I can answer that because my experience is primarily with trying to improve upon these algorithms that we're building. And actually, what always shocks me with this stuff is how relatively few specimens or few records can improve. Like, for example, one of those ones I was showing you where the human said how well it did, we only put like a few hundred
Mhm.
more in it and it improved it. So I'm always surprised when I talk to the developers because they say, well, actually, I don't need like 10,000. I only need like, maybe 100 or 200 to actually tell the algorithm how to be better. So I don't know exactly what it would take to train the handwriting to be better, but I can tell you that when we've tried to tune it, it's more in the hundreds than it is in the tens of thousands of records. Yeah,
That's good. I wonder if it has to do, it's like, it's, natural. They already have the NLMs kind of sort of set up. Um,
right.
I I asked that because I know in the beginning it used to be the training data used to be very large, and I think I'm thinking more of training data for images, like for
Right.
iNaturalist and things like that. But that's good to know that it's just hundreds. Um, I guess this is more of a comment. If anybody wants to talk, go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm trying to see if anybody's raising their hand. Um, but this is more just a comment for, I guess, my own thoughts and opinions. I really struggle with ChatGPT because I know that a lot of these companies are proprietary, but I don't love their terms of service, which is that basically once it ingests it, it uses it for whatever it feels like, which includes generating content. And so I actually coming from the conservation side, I get really hesitant about people pushing in rare species data and rare species labels into ChatGPT because then potentially at some other point, some teenager could be doing a report or a poacher could be asking ChatGPT, where do I find this? And it can pull it
Yeah.
from its library. So that's just my comment to the group. Um,
I'm glad you made that comment. I think it's really important. And, I mean, I don't want to make it sound like we, don't have our own agency, but we were pushed by a lot of people in the community. Like, we were not planning to integrate ChatGPT, right? It's not like they forced us, but that was not really our plan. But we just kept getting people over and over. Why can't you do this? Why don't we do this? Why not ChatGPT? And so we're like, okay, we'll build this into it. But we yeah, I mean, that's a very big issue. And I think one of the things that we're actually looking at for the next grant is using a free large language model. And so, I mean, and this would give us an opportunity to maybe see where the terms and conditions would be different and better for these kinds of things. But that's at least we would have, so that people weren't paying, didn't have to have the it doesn't really address your issue, but it does kind of get to the financial side is something that's a little more realistic for smaller collections. Most collections are not going to be like, well, hey, this is going to charge you, but I can't tell you how much. Most of them are not going to be feel too good about that. So we're looking at other free models that, might give us more flexibility. Um,
I think that, yeah, I mean, ChatGPT and they have really bad practices, but I do know that, I mean, I'm sorry, it's just from what I have been reading about them and my experience with them is they tend to have not the greatest practices. I mean, on the same hand, you could also argue that they have been accused of data scraping the internet, so they could potentially be data scraping Cernak images. Um, so it might just be a moot point after all. But I do feel like other companies are trying to be a little bit more cognizant of that and trying to limit those kind of things. And not just ingest everything. Although
yep.
it does help. Um,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, there's a lot with the ethics of this that worries me personally. I mean, you hit on a big one, the privacy, whether it's taking proprietary or potentially sensitive information, right? I think that's all really important. I mean, there's this whole part too about like how much resources these things use.
mhm.
And, so it's like, okay, great. We're using some algorithm which, creates tons of carbon emissions and right. And, and like to try and save the earth, it's like, so I know that's like a big kind of broad statement to make, but I think all of these things are really important that we get a handle on
Yeah, that's actually a
before.
great
Yeah.
point. Southeast, which is this is most of the people. So I see there are a lot of people here from Virginia, and South Carolina. Heads up, Google is purchasing lots of land and building lots of servers here in the Southeast because the land is cheap and they're making deals with power companies such as Dominion. And it will raise your electric bill because they made a deal with the state. So they basically divide the electric bill across the entire state. So just keep an eye out for that. Not to mention from a conservation perspective, having a giant, you know, data processing center that's loud and sucking a lot of energy in the middle of a previously wild area is a whole other question for birds and animals. Um, But, there was one question that I think popped up last time from the in-person meeting that I don't think that we got to get to, or it was asked afterwards, I'm not quite sure. But it was, how can individual organizations add standards for their projects that may differ from the general guidelines on data entry?
Yes. Excellent question. So this is where we get into the sort of the finer details of, you know, what's realistic. So, I mean, it can, depending on what it is that you want to do. So if somebody comes to me and says, I have these 15 fields that they're very detailed, I have a completely unique way I want to do it. That could take quite a bit of time for us to develop. And so the reality is that would be better to do if you had some funding, so we could really put in the time that was necessary. But I think at this point, yeah, I would try and have a conversation and see what was possible. It's always better if we can just copy an existing workflow and just use it. But at the same time, if it's not going to give you what you want, that doesn't make any sense. But, people are surprised how long this can take, because if you're writing directions and help and you're taking screenshots and you're giving examples, anyone who's written a manual for digitization or volunteers knows. I mean, takes several hours. So we're dedicated trying to do what we can, and I want to make it work for people. I want to keep utilizing this project that we already have. But yes, I mean, there is a limit. Like if it looks like it's going to take 40 hours to do this, I'm going to probably say, okay, how can we come up with some funding, or could we maybe do part of this? So it definitely is a give and take, but I'm willing to have that conversation with anybody and make sure, because like I said, it doesn't make any sense if you're not getting what you're what you're after. So let's have that conversation. If somebody wants something really different, let's talk about it and see
Well,
how we can.
and I think that question came from, and I know I have some thoughts on that too, because I know the bryophytes and the lichens are different.
Yeah.
And so they're going to have different fields that people want to pull from it. Um, is there an option to add like a drop down, or is it all just like short text? Okay.
Yeah, there's drop downs, there's um multiple choice, there's a few different sorts of things. I mean, there's some drawing tasks which are more kind of get more into the morphometric type realm, or like image, object recognition type things. But yeah, we have drop downs, text boxes,
I was just
few,
thinking for like states, it might be easier to do a drop
yes.
down. Okay.
We try and use drop downs as much as possible.
Okay.
Um, the issue with the drop downs is if you get like really big, really, really long things, it doesn't do so great with.
Okay.
We tried to load like a couple thousand collectors because we thought we had the collectors for this certain collection that we basically knew we had them all. And so we thought they could pick from it. And it just turned out it didn't work very well. It was too long. It was
Yeah.
like too many options. They were just having to scroll and scroll and scroll. And so I was like, okay, I guess typing's maybe better. So that's, of course, there's better technologies out there for that, but
Mhm.
we'd have to, program that to make
Yeah.
that. But yeah, I mean, we love anything we can standardize or drop downs is always gonna be faster for the volunteers and better reconciling on the back end. Yep.
We are running up on the hour. Are there any questions from the group? Well, thank you so much, Michael, for coming. We really appreciate it. I know Avery and I for sure will be in touch.
Okay, great.
Um, because we do have that duplicate project we would like to run. And if nobody has any questions, I just don't want to run over. Just a couple general reminders. The next meeting is on Wednesday, December 18th, um, 2024 at 2 p.m. So please come. We've been working hard to get some more guest speakers. As always, if you have any thoughts or ideas or topics that you want covered in the future, or if you want to revisit a topic, um, send me an email, and we can work on that. And and big reminder, Michael Tedder, who is on this call, has a wonderful talk at 6 p.m. tonight. You can access it virtually, and you all should have received an email about it. And just before let's see, I want to make sure. So he is talking about the taxonomic assessment of botanical families in the Dalton State College Herbarium. So you should have received that information. And I can put, Michael, are you okay if I put your, Michael Tedder, are you okay if I put your email in the chat? Okay, so he said yes. So I'm going to put his email in the chat. And I'll go ahead and add that link in the chat as well. If anybody is interested. So, all right. Does anybody have anything else to bring up? I see there's a nothing. All
Hey,
right.
Chilla, I got one thing that Michael
for
and I have talked about, and I think most of the folks on this meeting are on East Coast time. So it's kind of come to the forefront that CERNEC, or the SciNet database, is getting a lot of traffic, and and I think we noticed that at about 2 p.m. our student technicians are just kind of twiddling their thumbs because it takes about 30 seconds between each specimen data entry transaction. And evidently this is kind of a problem that the Symbiotic Support Hub knows about. So if you guys out there are using CERNEC and recognize some slowness or that sort of thing, please share your experiences so we can kind of like inform the support hub as to how it's affecting us. I think we tried to get some kind of info out of the support hub to see what sort of resources they had and that sort of thing. But anyway, just be good to know, if you guys have experiences like that. That's all.
That's a really great point. PSA for those of you who don't know, because I know a lot of you work at institutions. It hasn't been formally confirmed yet, but it seems like Outlook or certain sets of Outlook accounts have been hacked. So there have been lots of hacking activities. So just be aware to report everything and report this to Symbiota because we don't know what's going on. I think the most recent one that was ridiculous to me was the oh god, I'm blanking on the name. It's that website where you can go and go back in time. I think it was the Internet Archives. It was the Internet Archives, I think, so that was hacked recently too. So I'm not saying that's what happened. Sorry, let me just be very clear. I'm just saying that make sure you report it so that people can investigate to make sure that that's not as what is happening to CERNEC.
I just have a quick question from when I overheard you and Michael chatting before, and you were talking about the extinctions, but I didn't catch the paper. Was that something from West Knapp
Yes.
publication? Or okay, I thought so, because yeah, I think I'd come across that. Appreciate confirming that.
Yes, it was. Yes, I just recently saw him speaking, and he had mentioned those statistics, and as I had said, that was something that had surprised me, and I would love to have him also come here and talk to you guys as well because I think he gave a really great presentation last week on this, and it's important to, for herbaria, it's a justification for herbaria existing is having this data because we are going through this 6th mass extinction event. And so we need to make sure that these specimens are preserved for conservation. All right. Well, thank you guys all for coming. I'll get the recordings up and a special thank you to Michael.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Chilla.
Thank you. Bye.